With the deadly plague spreading quickly, a young monk struggles to remain steadfast to his faith. The movie begins in 1348, set in plague-ridden medieval England. The narrator describes the horrors the plague has brought to their lands and how it has destroyed half the kingdom. The priests thought that the plague was God's punishment, but the narrator, who is a warrior, blamed witchcraft for its existence. And their task is to hunt down the demon. The next scene shows the protagonist, who is a young monk named Osmond, imprisoned by the other monks due to fears he might have contracted the plague. One of the older monks, Brother Ignatius, has died from the plague and is being taken for burial. While the monks go about their rituals, Osmond convinces one of the monks to let him out of prison. The next morning, Osmond gathers some food and goes out into the village, where he sees dead bodies everywhere and people crying for their loved ones. He makes his way to the house of the woman he loves, called Avril. Osmond tells Avril that the plague has spread and she must go to Dentwich Forest away from other humans, to hide out until this pestilence has passed. Avril begs Osmond to join her in the forest, but he feels leaving the monastery would be to betray God. She tells Osmond she will wait for him at Martyr's Cross in Dentwich Forest for a week and then move on. Osmond is torn, so he prays and asks for guidance from God to give him a sign to leave the monastery and reunite with Avril. Sometime later, Ulrich, an envoy of the bishop, arrives at the monastery. He has been sent to confirm if rumors of a village that cannot be harmed by the plague are true. The village, however, lies in the Great Marsh, and Ulrich requires a guide to take him through. Osmond sees this as a sign from God and volunteers to guide the group to the village. Once they leave the monastery, Ulrich meets the rest of his group, which consists of Wulfstan, Griff, Mold, Ivo, Swire, and Dailywag. Osmond finds out the group has been tasked with capturing a necromancer. They are supposed to bring the necromancer to the bishop for trial and execution so others won't stray from the path of God. On their way to the village, they come across a group of people who are about to burn a woman. They claim she is a witch who cast a spell on the well, which led to half the people being killed. Osmond tries to stop them, but Ulrich intervenes and releases the woman. He then takes her aside and kills her with his knife. At night, sitting across a bonfire, the soldiers ask Osmond where the church thinks the plague came from, and he answers that he thinks God is not punishing them with this trial. Swire thinks the plague was sent by the French, and Wulfstan thinks it might be true. Wulfstan shares a story of how he fought with a small army in the Battle of Crécy in Normandy, France. The French army had more soldiers, but because the English used the longbow, which was quicker to load and the arrows could travel more distance, they were able to kill more of the French soldiers, and the field was soon littered with the dead. King Edward ordered his soldiers not to show mercy and to hack the arms and legs of the dying soldiers. On that day, because the army of God turned to savagery, the English soldiers invited death among themselves, and the pestilence came. Osmond finds Ulrich and asks him why he killed the woman, and Ulrich told him if he had freed her, the mob would have caught her and burned her again. He said he had no choice but to spare her suffering, and sometimes that is the only choice you have. The next morning, the group is woken up by noises and discovers men in the stream with black hoods, beating themselves and walking with a cross. They tell the soldiers to turn back because the village they seek is full of savages. As the group continues their journey through burned villages, Griff spits out blood, and it turns out he has been infected. Ulrich tells him his journey is finished, and Griff asks for a quick death and for Osmond to take his last confessions. After Osmond blesses him, Griff is stabbed by Wulfstan and buried. The men finally reach Dentwich Forest. In the morning, while everyone is asleep, Osmond runs off to Martyr's Cross to find Avril. When he gets there, he finds her horse and her bloodstained clothing, but there is no sign of Avril. Osmond sees people in the forest and runs off to warn Ulrich. The men take positions just as they are attacked by the thieves. One of the attackers tries to kill Osmond and stabs him in the side. As Osmond and his attacker struggle, Ivo grabs the attacker and kills him, but is stabbed through the throat in the process and dies. Two of the thieves manage to steal the group's horses and get away. The rest of the men finally reach the marsh, but they have to leave their weapons cart behind because it will get stuck in the marsh. They finally cross the marsh and reach the village they were looking for. Unlike other villages, this village looks peaceful and there are no dead bodies. The soldiers are greeted by a man named Hob, who is the leader of the village. Ulrich hides the true purpose of their visit and tells Hob the soldiers are seeking refuge. He claims they were attacked in the forest while they were trying to bring relief for the people who were suffering from the plague. The men are instructed to wash by Hob, and there they see the second leader of the village, Langeva. She tells the men she will tend to their wounds and takes Osmond to her hut so she can dress his side wound. While tending to his wounds, Langeva reveals that her husband was killed by men of God. The men are led to a building where they will stay. It turns out to be a church that is covered in cobwebs and dust. One of the girls from the village is wearing a pendant that Ulrich recognizes as one that is worn by all the envoys of the bishop. He tells his men another group was sent before him and they never returned. The men are wary because there are no graves, no diseases in the village, and no one worships God. In the dining hall that night, Langeva welcomes the guests and Ulrich stands to offer the Lord's Prayer, noticing that the other villagers don't say it with him. Langeva beckons Osmond from the dining hall later and takes him to where Avril's body is being kept. She tells him they found her in the forest and she spoke of Osmond before she died. In his grief, Osmond goes to the church to pray, and he hallucinates Avril, who asks him why he wasn't there to save her. Ulrich finds him in the church and Osmond tells him there is nothing in the village except peace and relief from pestilence. Ulrich disagrees and tells him there might not be a plague, but there is no God in the village, and for that, they have to suffer. Ulrich also shares that he lost his wife and child, and just like Osmond, he has known his share of suffering, but that will not deter him from his mission. Osmond is joined by Langeva. He tries to warn her about the men, but she tells him she already knows they are there to harm her. She leads him to the forest where he sees a ritual being performed. Meanwhile, Ulrich has joined his men in the dining hall and they are all getting drowsy and unable to function due to the villagers drugging their drinks. Hob tells him that as a Christian he should be familiar with the concept of betrayal. Osmond observes the women of the village hold Langeva and put something on her face. He then sees her go towards a body that turns out to be Avril and brings her back to life. Unable to handle what he has seen, he runs away and comes across the tortured bodies of the soldiers the bishop had sent before. The scene cuts to black just as the villagers come to get Osmond. The next morning, all the men are bound in a pit that is filled with freezing water. Langeva shows the villagers their weapons cart and tells the villagers these Christians did not seek refuge but were at the village to kill them because they had renounced God. She then offered the men a chance to live if they too renounce their God. None of the men take her offer, so she tells Hob to choose the first man to torture. He picks Deádly, who is tortured and disemboweled in front of the other men. Swire, after seeing what's in store for the men, agrees to renounce God. He is told that he will be led to the edge of the village and freed, but the villagers take him to the forest and hang him. Langeva pulls Osmond out of the pit and tells him that he has traveled through hell and come to heaven. She tells him she has brought Avril, the love of his life, back from the dead, and he can live with her in the village if he renounces God. Osmond goes to where Avril is to see if she is alive. He finds her, but to him, she seems possessed. She does not seem to recognize him and is vomiting. She grabs a knife and stumbles around while speaking gibberish. Osmond grabs her and tries to make her see him, but she tries to attack him half-heartedly with the knife. Osmond believes Avril is a zombie and her soul is already in hell. In an attempt to free her from this pain, he stabs her with the knife. Osmond carries Avril's body outside for the other villagers to see. Langeva tells the villagers that the Christians are so cruel that they kill the ones they love, and this prompts Osmond to try to kill her as well. The village men stop him and beat him up. In the scuffle, Osmond drops the knife he had near the remaining prisoners. Ulrich is then brought out of the pit and tied. His limbs are tied to horses. Langeva gives him a chance to renounce God, which he refuses. He tells them that he has brought death to them and asks to see Osmond. Ulrich tells Osmond to rip his shirt, and once the shirt is off, everyone sees that Ulrich was infected with the plague and he has brought it to the uninfected village as well. The villagers whip the horses so Ulrich can be pulled apart limb by limb. Meanwhile, the other two soldiers have freed themselves with the knife Osmond dropped, and they make short work of the villagers, although Hob does manage to kill Mold. Wolfstan, seeing his last friend die, grabs Hob and brings him to the weapons cart where he captures him to take him back to the bishop. During the battle, Osmond chases Langeva towards the marsh to kill her. He loses her in the mist but hears her. She tells him she is not a witch but had used herbs to convince everyone that Avril was dead. She claimed that people needed miracles and they worshipped those who provided those miracles, which is why she used drugs and rituals to appear powerful. Osmond collapses from his grief and yells at Langeva to bring Avril back, but she tells him she cannot and he should pray to his God. In the last scenes, the narrator says that the village was untouched because it was so remote, but since the group had brought the plague to them, they soon succumbed to it. He narrates that he heard stories in the years that followed that Osmond had lost his heart and grown cold. He had taken up the sword in God's name and traveled throughout England to capture and kill witches. Due to his grief, he sees most other women as Langeva, and in an effort to hold her accountable, he falsely accuses those women of sorcery and executes them in the name of God. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you smash the like button, leave a comment, subscribe, and turn on the notifications to help the channel out. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.